There it is.
There we are. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us either live or later in the day tomorrow. My name is Lisa Wickman. This is the Biz Chat with Lisa. And my guest here today is Tabitha Melvin from Regional Vice President of Primerica and former teacher of 15 years. We are going to be talking today about money and financial wellness, and which we do. We like to talk about money, and we're going to get into a few things here shortly. This episode is brought to you today by Perfect Virtual Assistants, where we help you find talented Filipino virtual assistants for about $8 to $10 an hour starting, and help you with back-end support of your business, whatever it is you need. So let's dive in. Tabitha, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for being here. Tabitha and I met recently at a networking event, and so we were chatting, and we were talking about money and what she does in coaching. So we are going to dive right in, and we're going to start with, well, first of all, before we dive in, you have to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
Give me a brief introduction, but people have to know who you are. Why are we listening to you today?
Sure. Well, Tabitha Melvin, I live in Mankato. Well, I live in St. Peter technically, but my office is in Mankato. Former teacher, 15 years. I taught early childhood special ed, so I loved it. But it got a little too political for me, and I wanted to do something where I was making an impact, and I had already started with the company. We'll be celebrating our 22nd year here, November 3rd. And so we did this part-time to start while raising a family. I have our wonderful son, Reese Melvin, who is 26, and our daughter, Jocelyn, is 24. Been married to my amazing husband, Michael, for 30 years as of last November. So coming up on 31 here. But one of the things that really inspired us is we didn't know any of the rules. As a teacher, I knew nothing. I wasn't taught how about, money. I was basically told that money doesn't grow on trees. We're not the Rockefellers. We don't have any, those kind of things.
Those old concepts.
Yes, absolutely. And what happened is we, unfortunately, got caught up in, I would say, society or wanting things. And we wound up building a home, and we trusted our realtor, we trusted our banker, we trusted the process. And our mortgage wound up ballooning on us, and we wound up losing our home and having to file bankruptcy. And it was the hardest part of our marriage. One of the things that Mike and I got really good at was fighting over money.
Isn't that the number one reason for divorce? Money.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technically the number one reason is infidelity, but number two is money.
Okay,
so I talk about that a lot. But yeah, it's just one of those things where we had a lifeline. We had somebody reach out. My husband was recruited into the business, and I went up because it's a very family-focused company. And I was blown away the minute I walked into that environment. I met the amazing national sales director, Joe McCorder, that day, and our lives changed forever. And we knew that, where we were wasn't our past did not dictate our future. Our decisions did. Right. And we just dove in, and we got fully licensed, and we learned, and we made sure that we didn't repeat those mistakes. And so now it's just a passion of mine to teach that, because to be honest, nobody wants to talk about it. Right. And so many people, I believe statistically, it's right around 75% of people are struggling financially. So that means when we walk in a room and there's, 10 people, 7 out of those 10 people are struggling financially, but they just don't talk about it.
Is that really a real statistic that 7 out of 10 people are struggling financially?
Yeah, it's terrifying because, with inflation and just different things, and you've got the cost of almost obviously everything going up, but the wages aren't really keeping up with that. So then what do they do? I have moms and dads in here that are, struggling, but they just don't know how the rules of money work. And once they understand, and once they look at their whole sphere of financial household, it completely shifts and changes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this, because one of the things you want to talk about, or we decided to talk about, was why people fail with their money
Yeah.
financially? Why do people fail financially?
I think really that there's three main reasons. The first is nobody has a real financial plan, right? They're just winging it. They don't know what to do. The second is they don't have the financial literacy to understand what they could to do anyway, to have that pen to paper plan. And the third is they don't have a coach. They don't have anybody that's going to help and guide them and keep them accountable to those goals. And so how is somebody supposed to win the money game when they don't have those three things in place?
Yeah.
And money is the one thing that we rotate around on everything. It dictates the clothes that we wear, the home that we buy, all these different things. And it dictates whether we're on a staycation or a vacation, but nobody teaches us how it works. That doesn't seem right to me. And so that's really a mission, a passion and a mission of mine.
So I know that you do some education around this. Well, you've been a teacher, so talk a little bit about the education that you offer to people and that you teach people. Give us some lessons.
Some lessons. Well, I think the first lesson is that you have to be open to change, right? You have to be willing to talk about it, because a lot of people just, my husband does that. No, my wife takes care of the finances. No, it needs to be a team effort, and you have to be willing to learn and grow and, be like, oh, I just didn't know that, and let that go. Right. So, like I said, prior to myself, our past does not dictate our future. Our decisions do. And I'm not for everybody, and that's okay, because I am going to be there and I'm going to teach families. One of the things that we really focus on, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll make sure that there's a link to this. It's called the How Money Works book. And this is what we base all of our financial guidance on. We look at short-term, mid-term, and long-term financial planning. So short-term, we're looking at that, making sure you have that emergency fund. Then we're going to go into the short-term accounts that, 2 to 4 years, whether they want to buy a home or do they want to go on vacation, or, what does that look like? And then obviously the retirement, right? Because Social Security, is it going to be there for people? No. No. I mean, they're talking some really crazy stuff right now, and we just try to make sure that we plan for that ourselves, right? And why work 40 years to have 10 or 15 years in retirement? Will our bodies handle that? So a lot of people that I meet with, they're like, I want to retire early. Okay, well, how can we do that? And you can't just say, I want to retire early, and it magically happens. You actually have to put pen to paper. You have to be disciplined. And I think that that's the key, is that if one of the key things we talk about is, do you know your FIN number?
And a FIN number is?
And a FIN number is not a fish, by the way. I get that. They're like, a fish? No, it's a financial independence number, right? So how much money do you need to accumulate in order to retire on a standard of living that is adequate for you? Whether that means if you want to retire on $30,000 a year or $60,000 a year, it's a very different money, condition, basically, or situation. And so you have to prepare for that. And do you have a pension? Do you have a Roth IRA? Do you have a traditional IRA? Do you have a 401k? Do you have CDs? Where are you at? And then making sure all of those things are working for you so that you can successfully retire. And then, making sure the number one thing that holds people back from retirement is debt. Yeah. And so do you have a debt stacking plan? How are you getting out of debt? What is your date to debt freedom? And most people go, I'm never going to be out of debt. No, that's not true. Doesn't have to be.
Can you, because you just said something, I don't know that everybody knows what that means, but what is debt stacking?
Debt stacking basically is a tool that utilizes, the interest rate, the payment, the amounts of your debts. And then you put a plan together based on which debt is going to get me out of debt faster, saving me the most time and the most interest dollars. And so, we have a program that we put people's numbers into, and it gives them an actual physical plan that they can see, and then they can tackle that debt. And obviously life happens, right? So that's why it's fluid, and you have to, one of the things that we do pride ourselves on is that we do client reviews every year, because everything changes. And so, somebody Yeah, I mean, you might have something that comes up, or you might get an inheritance, or you might, sell a car, or you might have, a new house that you purchased, or whatever it might be. And so you have to adapt with that. And then you just, you readjust. And it's just a lot of people just don't have that actual physical program that they can see. And then, making sure that your tax dollars are working properly for you, that you're, maybe not giving the government an interest-free loan.
Yeah.
That's what, the average, as of this last year, the average tax return was over $3,000 for a family. And so, that would, if it's utilized differently, it might put back in $200 to $300 a month into their budget instead of struggling. So just different ways to look at money, to make sure that you're reaching those short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. And then a lot of people don't have any idea of what their paycheck looks like, right? They look at it, they just see the money that goes into their account, and that's it. And so what do all these different things mean? What does FICA mean? What does short-term disability mean? What, all these different things that can be on there. If they have a pension, what does that mean actually?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important that you understand how your money works, so that you can win the money game, and not necessarily having the banks, insurance companies, and the investment firms winning the game. Let's be a key player ourselves.
So that's all really great. And so you also work with business owners.
Yes, I think small businesses are, it's really hard to start a business. We started from ground zero, so I completely understand. I work with small businesses that have, 10, 15, 20 employees. I have some that are just starting that have 2 employees, and, all the way up to 100 employees, where I'll go in and I'll do a financial wellness workshop for them, and teach their employees the rules of money, so that they're not struggling, or at least they understand the concepts, they understand the benefits that the company is giving them, and then they can be a much more productive employee. Because when people have a financial plan and they're not as stressed out, do you know that the number one thing that when parents are fighting, so I love using this visual because it was totally myself. When we were raising our kids and we got involved in the business, our children were only 3 and 5 years old. And so when Mike and I would fight over money, they would run into their rooms and slam their doors because they didn't want to hear us, right? And so I don't know if anyone else can relate to that. But once we started taking control of our finances and actually had a plan, what was happening is that we were embracing each other. We were hugging. It was uncomfortable because we would sit down every Friday night and we would look at our budget and we would look at our receipts and all that stuff. But we would hug each other, and then our kids came running. And they were like, "Mom, Dad, I want to hug too." And so just going from those 2 extremes, I've lived that. I've lived that nightmare of phone call after phone call. And then I've experienced the joy of being able to take my kids on, company trips, or just trips in general. We just had a whole weekend with them this last weekend, which was amazing. So it's just different. So that when you have a healthy employee, you do not lose as much money on that. And, a lot of times too, small businesses aren't exactly supported. They get somebody that might come in there, whether it's their 403B provider, or a simple person, or simple IRA person, but they don't really actually bring value to them as a business. And so I really pride myself on making sure that I'm available for my businesses. They can call me anytime. I'm there. I will, if I need to do a quarterly review, I'll come into the office and, hey, I'm here, set a time to meet with me, chat, anytime they can. But they also get that free comprehensive financial plan if they want. And most financial plans in the industry, they're going to charge anywhere from $100 to $2,500. And, most people just they cannot afford me to come in and then charge them money to get them on a plan. They're like, well, I already knew I was in debt. Duh. I already knew so I really do feel like I'm a hope dealer. I give people hope that, they can start over. They can make a change. They can do it. And they're not judged and not sold a product. That's a big thing for me, is our personal experiences. We're not good in the finance industry to start. So I was very skeptical of people I worked with, trust me. And so, I think that's very important for the small businesses to have that person that's going to be supportive. I also take on, that fiduciary risk for them as well. So that's a key component too.
And as far as like smaller businesses, like I'm a solopreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an assistant in the Philippines, but I'm a solopreneur, and I'm
Yep.
assuming you help people like that.
Oh,
Sometimes
all the time.
businesses take on debt to
Yep. Absolutely.
so forth.
Yep.
What would be like one really awesome piece of advice that you could give anyone about money?
What I would 100% say is not necessarily to do your research, because TikTok, man, let me tell you, social media, it's the bathroom wall of the 21st century. Okay, so just because it's on social media does not make it true. But what I would
That
say
is so
is
true.
that it is so true. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that want to take advantage of people. And so what I would say is just make sure that you read outside resources, right? So, this how money works. We also have a YouTube channel called Where's the Money? And it just, again, it's more of an educational piece, but I truly believe that you have to take responsibility. You have to look that in the eye and be like, I can do this. And hire that coach, right? Or get that personal plan, get the financial literacy, make sure that those three key areas are taken as a priority. I hear all the time, oh yep, I'll get to that tab. Oh yep. I know I need to meet with you, but I've got this going on. Well, guess what? This is going to be that in a month.
Right.
So you might as well just do it.
So when I asked that question, what popped into my head was, don't bury your head in the sand.
100%.
And
yep.
So I was kind of on there.
Yeah. I hear, where were you 5 years ago? I hear that all the time. I swear, every appointment I do are like, where were you? I should have.
Well,
and that's true.
That's not helpful.
Right? But you can't. So what I always try to tell people then is like, okay, well then let's pay that forward. So let's look at our phone and let's see who we know as mutual acquaintances. And you know what? Let's pay it forward. Let's share a testimonial. Let's do something, and let's make sure that we are really giving back to our community and making sure that our friends and family are financially literate as well.
Well, this has been great. I appreciate you being on. I know that you offer free workshop with anybody who wants to meet with you to talk about their personal situation, or company. Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up the day?
No, I don't think so. I really hope that we can pay this forward for others, because so many people want to do the right thing, but they, then they trust that trusted financial professional per se. But sometimes they're sold a product. So, you know what, a second opinion or an autopsy never hurts, right? So I know that when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, in 2008 and 9, that we didn't just settle for one verdict, basically, right? We wanted to make sure that we had a second opinion. And I think that's very important when it comes to your personal finance as well. And really just engage. If you have a spouse, engage together, because especially as women, we like, oh no, I just don't want to deal with it. Well, guess what? If you don't deal with it now, you're going to have to deal with it in the worst time of your life, whether that be death or divorce. And so don't do that, ladies. Don't do it. And men, make the best gift. We just celebrated Father's Day. The best gift you can give your spouse and your children is financial stability and financial literacy. So I encourage people to make sure that they're carrying on that torch if they have it, or let's get your torch started.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important to teach kids about money. They need to teach it in the high schools. We could go on and on and on about that.
Oh my goodness. As a former teacher, I lived it.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, Tabitha, it was great to have you on. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes. That's a wrap. I hope you all have a fabulous day.
Thank you.
Thank you.